right. Thank you for that introduction, Uncle Michael, and thanks for the reading, Stephen. All right. So, who's ready for a faith boost? I'm going to start with a question. What is faith? This question is to help us kickstart our thinking tonight, and I hope it's something that will stay in the back of our minds throughout this coming week to help give us some positive thinking and just to help keep our brains ticking over on something positive in these trying times. Now, I have the privilege of having a friend of mine that sends me a verse each week as a small encouragement and a reminder of our great privilege that God has given us. I think this is a great idea, and he's been doing this for quite some time. And I found it to be actually quite a good boost, especially in times when you're having a bit of a rotten week or things just aren't going the right way. It's just a little pick me up that helps me quite well. Now, I'm going to play this short video by John Popel. I find it to be quite interesting about his experience as a physicist and a Christadelphian. He delves into the origins of our universe and just how perfect everything was created. Now, it can seem quite daunting at the start of this video, as there are some quite large words, technical terms, but when I was listening to his talk before I wrote this introduction, I found underneath all these technical terms, there was actually some very simple and fascinating points. But if all you can take away from this class is one point, as I'm sure we can all understand just how hard it can be to concentrate on a Wednesday night, I want you to just take this simple question with you. What does faith mean to you? I look at my kids and I can see in their everyday life the faith that they have in the simplest of things. I think is absolutely amazing. And as a kid, I was always pulling things apart, trying to figure out how things worked. I never really gave any thought or concern about when it came to put it back together, but it always seemed to work out. Now, most people would look at things like this and would go, "Oh, he's just lucky. He's had a fluke and it just worked, just happened to work." But I like to think of it as like a child's version of faith. Faith that in myself, I'd be able to work it out, even though I didn't necessarily have an instruction manual. I'm sure that this is something we can all relate to in some way in our everyday life and in our walk to the kingdom, as it is just like a child pulling things apart to find out how they work. We have no idea what we are doing, but we do have an instruction manual, the Bible. I find that Proverbs 3 verse 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lead not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. I think this is a very good couple of verses that we can take through our day-to-day life. It just reminds us how much faith and trust we need to put in God. Now, while we watch this video, I would like everyone to write down a point or a lesson, something that really stands out to you, or something that's important to you. If families, couples, if you guys want to just work together and just put together a short summary, that is perfectly fine. After this video, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion and just talk about these points and what they mean and how we can take these throughout the coming week.
I believe that this universe has been intentionally designed. Right from my childhood days when I'd be dismantling old clocks that I could seldom get back together, all the way through graduate school physics, I've always felt compelled to explore the world around me. For that reason, my only career has been in research physics, and for the same reason, I've devoured a range of spiritual literature. I remain a keen student of the Bible, and I have legal qualifications in Christian ministry. Now, many assume that these two pursuits are going to clash head on, but that's never been true in my experience. As a physicist, I fully embrace the concept of the scientific method to learn about the universe, And as a spiritual person, I would never be so narrow-minded as to insist that the scientific method is the only rational means by which we can perceive reality. Rationalism itself will reveal logical boundaries to scientific inquiry without in any way diminishing its method, as we shall see. Scientific method consists of observing physical effects impartially, under controlled conditions, making the minimum number of assumptions beforehand, and, ideally, reproducing these effects. In this way, using this method, science can teach us how the universe operates, from the immense astronomical scale all the way down to the subatomic. That said, not all accepted science has come from using scientific method. Cosmology, for example, which is the study of the origin of the universe, actually cannot derive from the scientific method. Scientists believe that the earliest subseconds of the universe contained up to 11 dimensions, magnetic monopoles, and an inflation of energy of almost incalculable magnitude. Obviously, none of these postulates are reproducible. None have ever been performed in a lab. In fact, none have ever even been observed. That doesn't discredit those ideas per se, but even the ardent rationalist must confess that to believe in this theory of the origin of the universe is, ironically, not a product of scientific method, but actually an article of faith. One of science's biggest triumphs is showing how mechanisms can operate through their inherent properties, without the need for supernatural forces or magical effects. Ancient religions that claimed that objects work because they had miniature spirits inside them, they've been disproven and dispelled. Yet it's this very advance that causes many to conclude that science has disproven the existence of a God. This is simply an overstep in logic. Scientific method can't determine whether or not natural mechanisms have been designed to work in the way that they do, or whether they've somehow self-organized or self-assembled. Figuring out how something works does not logically preclude any chance that it was designed to work that way in the first place. Take an airplane, for example. An airplane is able to fly because of the cross-sectional shape of the wing. It was a Dutch mathematician, Daniel Bernoulli, who figured out the correct shape that meant that as the airplane or the wing traveled forward, there'd be a pressure differential developed above and below the wing, and that would itself shove the plane into the air. This principle was first successfully exploited, as you may know, by the Wright brothers in North Carolina at the beginning of last century. Now let's suppose we have a witch doctor and a scientist who both observe the plane flying. The witch doctor claims that it's the disembodied spirits of the Wright brothers somehow infused in the metal which keeps the plane in the sky. The scientist, by contrast, uses scientific method to study the observable facts. She notes the weight and velocity of the plane, the pressure above and below the wing, and so forth. The scientist observes no disembodied spirits, and yet she's able to explain how the plane flies entirely through natural means. She concludes that there are no spirits lurking within the plane, which is true. She concludes that the witch doctor holds an incorrect view of the universe, which is also true. But were she to conclude that this proves the Wright brothers never existed, or Bernoulli never existed, she would be flat wrong. Yet this is exactly the mistake in logic that people make when they say science has proved that God cannot exist. The ability to explain mechanisms through natural phenomena does not prove or disprove whether an external intelligence designed them beforehand. Similarly, in my own scientific research, we developed a drug delivery system, which is a gel that has tiny little spherical molecules with the drugs on the inside. The idea is that you inject this gel under the skin, and then as the gel dissolves, the drugs can bleed out over weeks or months. And it's designed to be used with patients who aren't mentally capable, perhaps, of taking their own drugs reliably. we basically synthesized a bunch of molecular sticks. Now they're hydrophobic on one end, which means they repel water, and they're hydrophilic on the other end, which means they attract water. And then we put the drug on the hydrophobic end. All we now have to do is take all these molecular sticks and throw them into water. And because the hydrophobic ends try and hide from the water, they cause themselves to assemble into these perfect little spheres with all the drugs on the inside. Here's the point. Humans can't physically manipulate molecules. They're too small. So if a scientist impartially observes our gel, and he knows everything about the universe, but he doesn't know about hydrophobic and hydrophilic behavior, he's going to conclude there's no way we could have built that gel. It must have come together by chance or some other way. But we had caused those tiny spheres to come together at a scale that we couldn't manipulate. We had achieved the design that we always had in the first place. It didn't look like we could have built that gel, but we had. So, what have we learned? We've seen that figuring out a natural functional system cannot logically determine whether that structure or system was designed. Science reveals a mind-boggling complexity of mechanisms at every length scale that exists. And logic insists that as complexity increases, then the probability of it being designed also increases. If any wing shape can fly, for example, then it's a lot more likely that planes can develop by chance. But science has shown beyond question, to the contrary, that our universe is almost immeasurably intricate. And this intricacy is only the beginning of the problem of believing in an undesigned world. Beyond the intricacy of natural systems, there's also a delicacy of balance of those systems, which are required for any of it to exist. Many of these balances are exactly what they need to be for life to exist, and so clearly the probability of this happening by chance gradually whittles away. At the largest length scale, we know astrophysics shows us that if the Earth is just a couple of percent closer to the sun, then all the water will boil off and all life dies. But if that same Earth is a couple of percent further away from the sun, why, it's too cold for life to even begin. If the Earth spins just a little bit faster, there are disastrous Coriolis winds that'll destroy everything. Yet if it spins a little bit slower, the difference in temperature between daytime and nighttime becomes lethal. Similarly, the degree of oxygen has to be exactly right. It must be high enough to sustain life, obviously, but it must be low enough so that the entire planet doesn't spontaneously combust. The actual value that we have, which is about 20.9%, sits exactly within that tiny window. At the lab where I work, I myself installed oxygen deficiency monitors for protection because there's a lot of strange gases about. And they're set to trigger at 19.5% and 23%, small window. Because at 19.5%, humans will faint and suffocate and die. But at 23%, even the tiniest spark could cause a huge fire or a lethal explosion. And those small windows of acceptability pale into insignificance when we step down and start considering our universe on the molecular or atomic scale. All life on Earth is based on the atom carbon. And the probability of a carbon atom coming together requires the ground state energies of those merging nuclei to match, such that the chances of it happening purely randomly is 1 in 10 to the 16. And 10 to the 16 means a 1 with 16 zeros behind it. And stepping down to the subatomic level gets more demanding still. For stars to exist, and therefore for us to have any life, because our stars are the factories for all of our elements, for stars to exist, the ratio between the strong magnetic force, which is one of the 4 fundamental forces of the universe, and the electromagnetic force has a tuning delicacy of 1 part in 10 to the 40. That's a 1 with 40 zeros behind it. The perfection of these balances is statistically absurd if our universe is undesigned. In my judgment, it requires nothing short of blind faith to believe that this could have happened by chance. And blind faith doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't appeal to my rational mind. Frankly, in my opinion as a scientist, the probability of the universe forming by chance, by random interactions, is as close to zero as one can reasonably get. Let's take an analogy. Imagine a tornado goes through a scrapyard. Could you believe that this tornado would assemble by random chance and random interaction a fully formed Boeing 787 plane? Fully fueled, fully upholstered, painted perfectly in the colors of, let's say, Virgin Atlantic, with all of its aeronautical elements perfectly contoured, and all of its software systems fully updated to their latest levels and functional. I'd like to think that in any reality, any rational mind that came across that plane in the scrapyard would say that plane has clearly been designed, built, and brought here. And I'd like to believe that no rational mind would wander through that scrapyard and see the plane and say, wow, it must have been really windy. Now, one might think, but there's been billions of years. Surely anything is possible by random chance in that length of time. By no means. The estimated age of the universe is a mere 10 to the 17 seconds. That's not reasonably enough time for even a protein, let alone a self-replicating cell, to be constructed, if the only thing to construct it is random chance in an expanding, unthinking, barely populated space. And not that this first cell or this first protein would survive to achieve anything without the rest of an ecosystem entirely around it to make use of its existence. Science shows us that the ecosystems in which we exist are highly interdependent, meaning it requires many factors and many conditions to come together simultaneously for any part of that system to survive. And this places even higher demands on the probability of an undesigned or accidental existence. Not only that, but there are actually things in this universe we can observe which seem contrary to the idea of undesigned development. Think, for example, about human altruism or human aesthetics. In many species, parents are prepared to sacrifice their lives to keep their children alive, and that makes good sense for survival. But humans also show a propensity for children to sacrifice themselves for their parents, and that is counterproductive to the survival of the species. Similarly, if predators are hunting, then it's that varietal of the species which is distracted by aesthetics, for example, distracted by the beauty of a sunset, which is most likely to be caught, which is least likely to survive and reproduce. Now, a designer that values aesthetics and values altruism might deliberately cause them to exist, but development through random chance favoring survival would discard them. And yet, here they are. So the rational mind is now in a position to issue a challenge. How is this universe possible without intended design when it demonstrates both intricacies and a delicacy of balance of those intricacies seemingly beyond statistical probability? The only answer appears to be, well, we're unbelievably lucky. I'm sorry, that's blind faith. Both science and spirituality oppose that answer. Some suggest there could be an infinite number of universes, and that would allow even the unlikely versions to exist. Okay, problem is, that doesn't really change the question. Even if one merrily wheels in trillions and trillions of universes, the question only changes from how is this universe possible to how is it that we exist in this one universe, which of all the trillions of universes is pretty much the least likely. Again, the only answer is we're unbelievably lucky. And I agree. It's unbelievable. That's why I don't believe it. That's how I end up where I am. I believe this universe has been intentionally designed. This is a rational statement. It is fully consistent with my scientific education, and it underpins my reasoned faith. The statistical impossibilities of the heavens demands this, and therefore, by the same token, they testify to the existence of a highly skilled designer. Most importantly of all, I arrive at this conclusion not in spite of scientific method and rational deduction, but precisely because of them. Thank you.
All right. Now, I know there's probably a lot of information in that and can seem quite confusing. But hopefully we've been able to pick a few points out there, and we'll be able to have a decent discussion and hopefully take away some things that's going to help give everyone a bit of a boost this week. Now, I think the biggest thing out of that I like the most is it just shows just how specific and perfect everything is and everything has to be for us to survive. And I just still cannot get my head around people who believe in the Big Bang and just things happen by chance. So, going into our discussion, I'm just going to randomly pick people to share some points with us. And yes, I can see you shaking your head, Stephen. You're not going to like that, but this is going to be fun. If people don't want to share, that is perfectly okay. Don't feel pressured in any way, because I, for one, understand that. I'm not usually one to want to talk in front of everyone. So I might now jump to the Teals, if they wouldn't mind sharing some insight that they've found.
So I'm a science teacher almost. So I guess I love that science can enhance my faith. There's like my little example of this is that there's a bacteria and it has a little red thing in it, and the red thing helps it find the light. And I think that's incredible. Like, it's tiny. And I think that one of the messages from that Faith Talks was that science brought him to a place that enhanced his faith. And I love that. Yeah, I think, Dan, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was just struck with the, I guess that I'd always known that there was lots of balance associated with where the Earth sits in relation to the sun and so on. And obviously he summarised some of those key points, which helps to sort of say, well, that's incredible that it that it is positioned exactly where it is, and it works exactly the way it needs to, and that it can be no other way. Even by a small percentage, it would not work. And I guess the other bit that grabbed me was just the whole. I'd never really thought about the fact that he said it was 1 by 10 to the 17 seconds that the universe has supposedly existed, and in relation to the probability of of everything happening by chance, it just can't possibly occur. And so I guess it puts in perspective that there is no other alternative than it is by design. So that's what I got out of it. So yeah, thanks Brendan.
Oh, thanks for that, guys. And yeah, it just comes back down to it being intentionally designed. That there's just no way things like this can just happen by chance. And
I think, Lindsay, wanted to say something.
Just a little one from me. I guess I was just really reassured by that talk, even in terms of faith, because it's today there's so much information coming at you that can make you feel a bit insecure, in that, well, I must be a bit basic if I go for the fallback position of God. And then when I hear that talk and the intricacy and the balances put into scripture, and I'm not quite, I mean, I know that John Popel is an incredibly high level scientist. What does he runs the Hadron Collider in the United States. That's the level that he's working at. And you know what, it does give me, it encourages me, but for all that, I know that my high priest is Jesus, and never to put a human being on a pedestal, else you can end up disappointed. But really appreciate the way that you're helping us to think, actually. So thanks, Brandon.
That's all right. I'm more than happy to be able to help out. Now, Stephen, what have you got to enlighten us?
Stephen has a great point.
Not the greatest point, but I like the fact when he was saying that when the tornado, if it went through a scrapyard, then suddenly like a full
Plane.
Boeing 747 would come out and sort of, I don't know. I've always thought the same thing, but also it made me think of the oldest Holden Ute. This flaming tornado goes straight through it, and out comes a 2012 Holden Ute. That was just, that was spot on to me. I've always thought the same thing with creation and all that. It's just too good to be true. Just sort of. Anyways.
Absolutely, and it just amazes me that people can still just go, it just happened. It was, the Big Bang, and everything just happened to appear perfectly where it's supposed to be. It just astounds me that people can still believe that after all the evidence that they see as well. Now, Amy, Johnny, have you guys got anything to share?
Pretty good. The video was a lot. My brain is like, I'm simple, but no, I definitely take from it that God is amazing and very, very detailed, because if I had to design something like that, it would just be like a little ant farm and that's it. So
absolutely. And I remember like when I first watched this at first, my brain was just like exploded. Like I was just like, it was so technical, but the more you listen to it and you just listen to the underlying messages and what he's explaining, and it just helps you and appreciate the simple bits that help boost our faith. Uncle Michael Clanker, have you got anything to share?
Yeah, I've always found it amazing, like as we can see today, for example, being the first day of spring and how we've got our different seasons and everything, the way like everything is so, like he's pointing out his video, everything is just so precise. We're tilted at an angle of 23.5 degrees. That actually gives us our seasons, and our seasons itself, just remind us of the cycle of our lives, and that God is in control. Like spring, sort of like the beginning of life, and then summer, the prime of our life, autumn, sort of getting a bit older, then obviously winter, sort of a death type of thing. But and then resurrection again when you come around to spring. So just that cycle in itself is just I find is really beautiful. And
that just links to as well the if you just look at nature around us, and it comes right down to even the simplest of things, like if the bees were to be extinct, then what's going to carry the pollen from flower to flower and help all the different flowers to actually exist. It just comes down to the smallest details like that, and it's just amazing. Brother John, have you got anything to share for us?
Well, like you said, like all these factors that he pointed that, like the sun, how we're tilted, if the Big Bang or whatever happened, but just by chance, that's only one thing. There's so many factors that the atmosphere, the air. I think the air's always got to be 48.5%, and it's always at the right percent. The oxygen level and just everything. There's so many things that it can't happen by chance. It's all got to be created by God, because there's so many factors. Like by chance, it can't be. It's impossible. There's just so many things. Yeah,
of course. And I suppose if people like you that have recently come into the truth probably even have a better appreciation for it than ones that have actually grown up in the truth as well, because you've seen both sides of the fence effectively. And from what you guys were taught growing up, and outside of the ecclesia, and then coming actually, you know, finding us, and then, you know, what you believe now. I cannot just believe how, you know, how that would be.
I was right into my science shows on TVs, like before I met the truth. And believe me, there was a stage where that I did think that everything there did happen by chance and the Big Bang, and, you know, it grew from a germ. And then at one stage even thought maybe we'll probably hear from aliens, you know, just, yeah. And then, you know what, I'm so glad I've met the truth, because it's put me at ease.
Yeah, no, it's good though, because yeah, you've got to mix science and the truth together to, you know, like in the video, to get a logical answer. Otherwise, you can't get the right answer. Uncle Des and A. Lois, have you got anything to share with us?
I've heard John on that before. I've heard him in the flesh do that. He stayed with us many years ago when we were at Castle Hill. The point that I would like to make is the reading you took from Psalm 9 tonight was very good, but Psalm 8, I think, effectively puts it in place for us who believe in the Word of God. Psalm 8, verse 3, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. And that's the God of all creation. It's David here saying, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. And when we consider what we believe in relation to the creation of this world and the universe, I think we are amazingly blessed beyond all the people around us to know the creator of all who put it in place. And we have no alternative but to believe that, because there is no alternative. Yeah. The other things, as John says, are unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't have summarized that better myself. And I love reading through the Psalms when it comes to your faith, because there's just so many points and so many chapters in Psalms that are just amazing at helping you be uplifted, and just especially when you're going through a rough time, because that's when David was writing the Psalms. He would be, you know, he'd be rejoicing, or he'd be going through a rough time, and these were his letters. Uncle Michael Langtree, have you got anything to share with us or not?
When he was talking about all those probability things and how it just simply can't it can't be by random chance. And when you were saying you just don't understand how people can believe in Big Bang theories and evolution and all that sort of thing, what immediately came to my mind was a verse in Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Now, the point there is it's a direct reflection on the rebellious human nature of mankind, because he wants to reject God, and he wants to go his own way. So he has to believe in Big Bang theories and stuff like that, because they don't have any excuse, so they have to make up something. And that's what they've made up. And so that's why they have this blind faith in random chance, because they can't accept God. So what else are they going to do? They have to dream up some fantasy thing, which of course is to believe that the universe is just a random chance is, of course, just fantasy. So I sort of pity those sort of people, and I can understand it because of in my background. I was always brought up to believe that the universe was a random chance thing. And I could never really sort of properly understand that, even then, years and years before I'd come into the truth. But you just sort of had to accept it, even though it was basically full of holes. But when you can accept God, when you know that He's true, and when you have faith in God, which means to trust Him, then you can easily believe in creation. So that's pretty much my take on it.
Yeah, that's a really good point there. Because that comes back to, like I said before, people who have come into the truth, they in a way, I think they have a better understanding than us, simply because they've been brought up differently. So they've seen the teachings of what other people outside of the truth are taught from a young age. So in that aspect, I almost feel a bit ignorant, not being able to understand, both sides of the fence as such.
Yeah, well, the point is, you have all these professors and your science teachers at school and everything else, and your Catholic priests and Catholic brothers and so on, all teaching this sort of stuff, and they're the authority figures. They're the big authority figures. So you sort of have to, you just sort of go on. You believe it just because of it's the mainstream thing. And anyone else is some kind of fruitcake. But then you finally come around 180 degrees, and you understand that believing in God is the way to go, and that if you don't believe in God, then you're a fruitcake.
Yeah, of course. I suppose that comes right down to we're not necessarily in this day and age taught to question those who are actually teaching us. We're just expected to just believe what we're told and not ask questions and not challenge that.
Not only that, but if you do challenge it, you get thumped on real hard.
Of course, yeah. Now, Uncle Simon and Sonia, have you guys got anything to share with us tonight?
That video was good. I enjoyed it. And it just reminded me with Johnny's talk as well, with the snowflake. You're never going to find a snowflake exactly the same. Thank goodness you're never going to find anyone like me exactly the same. And for all of us, the way we look, even twins, they've got different characters. There's always, they've got something else that says they're apart. But I was trying to think, as when I was a young fella, or that never really the question about, this Big Bang Theory. I heard it all, but I don't know whether I was from my grandmother just told there's a God or whatever, but I've always seen creation and the grass, and because I've been around the sea a lot, I've just found it fascinating, and I know that everything is in a system, and I've never really questioned it. So when I heard about God, it just all makes sense. And I only know I'm black and white as far as very simple, as people know. It's either yes or no. Like I'm not a rocket scientist, but just in knowing yes and no is common sense. And as Michael touched on, with pride, that's what the whole Bible talks about. It's the pride of life that people don't want to know God. And like Sonia's father, for example, he says he's an atheist and this and that. So they all want to meet, the little alien or someone out there God is already out there and saying, hey, that's me who is righteous. But they're actually all saying the same thing. They're just denying that it's actually God. So I just find it fascinating that when you talk to any person that wants to deny God, not that to be judgmental, but look at their lifestyle. look how stupid they are in other things in their life without even talking about, you know, godly things, just in things they do in their own life, whether they think that they've got a lot of money or they've got 10 houses, or, you know, they're so smart in their profession. It's just amazing that you see how stupid people really are. So I just find it lovely that we have this wonderful creator, as we all do, this righteous God, and you just look at everything and it just makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, and I remember because at work we've got a two sisters who are actually identical twins. Now, when I first met them, I could not tell them apart. Like, it was just, I remember one of them coming into the office, asking me a question and walking out, and the other one came up behind me to ask a question. I had to do a double take. So I was like, hang on, you've just walked out that door and you're behind me. Like, because at first I didn't realize that they were twins. But you know, they've been there for 6 months now and they're two completely different people. Like you know, because you get to know them and you see them every day. So you know exactly who's who. But yeah, it's just little things like that where, you know, the similarities in the gene pool is just amazing. Now, I just looked at the time and we are running pretty close to finishing. So I would love to keep talking and keep discussing with everyone. If anyone has any points they'd like to throw in quickly before we finish up, feel free to do so. All right. Well, thank you everyone for signing on tonight and for the awesome discussions. Hopefully that this will help everyone this week with a little bit of boost in your faith, especially with these trying times. And God willing, we will be able to get together soon for more discussions. Thank you, everyone.